Black twins threatened at kung fu class by bullies, unaware they are brutal fighters. Yana and Maya had always been close. They were twins, born a minute apart, and shared everything from their childhood memories to their dreams. Growing up in a small neighborhood, they learned to support each other no matter what. Their bond was unbreakable, and they always knew that no matter how tough life got, they would face it together. But there was one thing they hadn't done yet: take on a challenge that would test their strength, both physically and mentally. One day, their mother suggested they join a local kung fu class. She thought it would be a good way for them to learn discipline, improve their fitness, and maybe even learn to defend themselves. At first, Yana and Maya were unsure. They had never tried martial arts before, and the idea of being the only newcomers in a class full of experienced fighters seemed intimidating. But after thinking about it for a while, they decided to give it a try. They had always pushed each other to try new things, and this felt like another challenge they could face together. When they walked into the martial arts school, they couldn't help but feel nervous. The room was filled with students practicing their moves, punching, kicking, and blocking in perfect rhythm. The sounds of feet hitting the floor and the slap of fists against pads echoed throughout the room. The twins exchanged a quick glance, and despite the butterflies in their stomachs, they stepped inside. The instructor, a tall man with a calm demeanor, greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said. "You're here to learn kung fu, yes?" Yana nodded, and Maya gave a shy smile. They were both eager to get started, but also unsure of what to expect. The instructor handed them a pair of gloves and pointed them toward the back of the room, where they would begin their first lesson. As they began to change into their training uniforms, they noticed a group of students at the front of the room. They were standing in a circle, laughing and chatting loudly. Yana and Maya couldn't help but overhear some of their conversation. They were making fun of the new students, commenting on how they must be out of their league and too soft to survive in a real martial arts class. The twins exchanged a look but said nothing. They weren't bothered by the comments, at least not yet. They had come here to learn, not to prove anything to anyone. Still, the whispers felt like a cloud hovering over them. The group of students was led by a boy named Josh, who seemed to think of himself as the leader of the class. He was tall and muscular, always the first to finish any drill. Josh had been in the class for over a year, and he made it his mission to show off in front of the newcomers. The twins could already tell he wasn't the most welcoming person, but they ignored him. They had learned a long time ago that people like Josh didn't deserve their attention. As their first class began, the instructor demonstrated a few basic moves: blocking punches, executing a simple roundhouse kick, and using footwork to avoid attacks. Yana and Maya watched intently, eager to learn. They were surprisingly quick learners, picking up each move with ease. The instructor took note of their concentration and quietly moved them to a corner of the room to practice on their own. While the twins practiced their punches and kicks, Josh and his friends couldn't help but watch them. "They don't belong here," one of Josh's friends whispered. "They look like they'll be out of here in a week." Josh smirked, agreeing with the comment. "They probably can't even throw a punch," he muttered under his breath. Yana and Maya, however, didn't hear them. They were too focused on their training. They had both been athletes in high school. Yana had played basketball, while Maya had been on the track team. They were used to pushing their bodies, training for hours to improve their skills. Kung Fu was no different. With every move they made, they grew more confident in their abilities. They weren't there to impress anyone, they were there to get better. As the class continued, the students were split into pairs to practice sparring. Yana and Maya were paired together, which made sense to the instructor since they were new to martial arts. They weren't expecting to fight anyone else just yet, but sparring with each other would give them the chance to get used to the moves. Josh, however, wasn't satisfied with this arrangement. He walked over to the instructor and with a cocky smile suggested that he could help the twins get up to speed by sparring with them. The instructor raised an eyebrow but allowed it, figuring that a little competition wouldn't hurt. "All right, Josh. Show them what you've learned," he said. Josh confidently walked over to the twins, who were stretching and preparing for their first real sparring session. He was much taller and stronger than both of them, and the twins couldn't help but feel a little intimidated. But they didn't back down. They were here to learn and to grow. They wouldn't let Josh's attitude stop them from giving their best. As the sparring began, Josh wasted no time. He came at them fast, throwing punches and kicks with all his strength. The twins dodged and blocked, their eyes scanning for openings. They had been training for only a short time, but they were quick on their feet. Josh's attacks came at them in rapid succession, but they were able to stay calm and focused. Yana blocked one of his punches, while Maya ducked under another, narrowly avoiding a roundhouse kick. They could tell Josh was starting to get frustrated. He thought he could intimidate them with his strength, but they weren't going to let that happen. "Come on, fight back," Josh taunted, but the twins remained composed, determined to hold their ground. They didn't need to prove anything to him. They were here to learn, and that's exactly what they were doing. As the sparring session continued, Yana and Maya's movements became smoother. They were getting the hang of the basic techniques, and their reflexes were improving. Josh's frustration grew with every passing second. The more he tried to outsmart them, the more he realized that the twins were no pushovers. They might have been new to Kung Fu, but they had a fire inside them that couldn't be extinguished. By the end of the sparring session, Josh was out of breath. He had underestimated the twins, and they had proven him wrong. They hadn't won, but they hadn't lost either. The instructor watched with quiet approval. He could see the potential in the twins. They were stronger than they looked, and with more training they would become formidable fighters. As the class wrapped up, Yana and Maya exchanged a look. They didn't need to say anything. They knew what the other was thinking. They had come here to learn, and that's exactly what they were going to do. The next challenge awaited, but they would face it together, just like they always had. In the days that followed, Yana and Maya returned to the Kung Fu class with renewed focus. They had felt the sting of Josh's taunts, but it only made them more determined. They didn't want to be just another pair of new students who dropped out after a few weeks. They weren't going to let Josh or anyone else stop them from pursuing something they had set their minds to. The next class was just as busy as the first. Students lined up across the mats, practicing their stances and moves. The sound of feet slapping against the floor echoed around the room, a constant rhythm that kept the energy high. The twins joined the group and started warming up, stretching their legs and practicing the basic punches they had learned. Josh and his group of friends were there again. The moment they saw the twins, they couldn't help but laugh. They whispered to each other, making sure Yana and Maya could hear. "They'll never last in here," one of them said with a grin. "They probably don't even know what they're doing." The twins kept their heads down and continued to stretch, pretending not to notice. But Yana and Maya could feel the tension in the air. The whispers, the stares, it was all part of the game the bullies played. They were used to being judged by people who didn't know them, but it still stung. Their bond, however, was stronger than any insult. They shared a quick look, and without speaking, they both knew what they needed to do. They were here to stay. The instructor began the lesson, showing everyone a new technique, how to block a kick while simultaneously preparing for a counterattack. It was more complex than anything they had done before, but Yana and Maya were determined to master it. They watched carefully, trying to understand the movements in the instructor's demonstration. As the class broke off into pairs to practice, the twins found each other again. "Let's do this," Yana said, her voice steady. Maya nodded, and they began to practice the technique. Their movements were smooth, almost like they had done this 1,000 times before. Yana would block the incoming kick with precision, and Maya would follow up with a quick strike to simulate a counterattack. They had an unspoken rhythm between them, their bodies working in perfect harmony. Josh, standing nearby with his friends, noticed them again. He wasn't used to seeing new students pick things up so quickly. It bothered him. He couldn't believe that these two quiet girls, who he had thought were weak and out of place, were catching up to him and his friends so fast. He had expected them to mess up or give up, but instead, they were growing stronger with each class. "Hey, Maya," Josh called out, trying to get her attention. Maya didn't respond, but Ayana turned around to face him. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone calm, but there was an edge to it. Josh gave a smug grin. "You think you're going to be good at this? You're not even doing the move right. Let me show you how it's done," he said, walking over to them. He was trying to assert his dominance like he always did. Ayana didn't back down. "We're here to learn just like everyone else. We don't need you to show us anything." Josh's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see how long you last when things get tougher." He shot them one last glare and walked off, trying to look confident, but the doubt in his eyes was evident. The twins didn't waste another second on him. They returned to their training, focusing entirely on the technique the instructor had shown them. They were starting to get it. Their moves became more fluid, more natural. As the days passed, Ayana and Maya began to notice something. The other students were starting to treat them differently. At first, it was subtle, a nod of respect here, a compliment on their technique there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make them feel like they belonged. They were still new, but now they were no longer invisible. Josh, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He watched as the twins practiced, trying to find a weakness in their technique. He'd seen them improve in just a few classes, and it irritated him. He had been the best at this school for so long, and now these two new students were challenging that. He couldn't let it happen. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session of sparring drills, Josh walked over to the twins once more. "You think you've got this all figured out, don't you?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're just here to train," Maya replied, her voice steady and calm. She had learned early on that responding to Josh's provocations only gave him the attention he wanted. Josh took a step closer. "You won't be able to keep up. The instructor only lets you keep training because he doesn't want to see you fail. You'll never be able to get to my level." This time it was Ayana who spoke. "You don't know anything about us. We didn't come here to compete with you, Josh. We came here to get better, and we will. You'll see." Josh wasn't used to being spoken to like this. Most of the time, he was the one doing the talking, the one with the control. But Ayana and Maya had a quiet strength about them that he couldn't seem to break. Frustrated, he turned away, but not before throwing one last comment over his shoulder. "Keep dreaming, twins. You'll never be good enough." But Ayana and Maya didn't react. They simply watched as he walked off, knowing that no matter what Josh said, they were in control of their own journey. They didn't need to prove anything to him. All they needed to do was keep improving, keep working, and keep pushing forward. As the weeks passed, the twins continued to grow stronger. Their techniques became sharper, their reflexes quicker. The instructor noticed their progress and began giving them more challenging tasks, pushing them to their limits. Yana and Maya welcomed the challenge, eager to prove to themselves how far they could go. Other students started asking them for tips and advice, amazed at how quickly they had improved. The twins were humble, offering help when they could but always staying focused on their own growth. Slowly but surely, they were gaining the respect of everyone around them, not just for their physical abilities, but for their attitude and perseverance. And as for Josh, he kept trying to provoke them to get under their skin, but it didn't work. Every time he tried, Ayana and Maya simply ignored him, focusing on their own training. They weren't bothered by his words anymore. They had come to realize that true strength didn't come from showing off. It came from within, from staying focused on what really mattered. One day, after another tough class, the instructor pulled the twins aside. "You two have come a long way," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "I've seen a lot of students come and go, but you've shown something special. Keep it up, and you'll go far in this sport." Ayana and Maya smiled at each other, knowing that this was only the beginning. They had proved to themselves that they were capable of more than they ever imagined. They had faced the challenges, the bullies, and the doubts, and they had come out stronger on the other side. This was just the beginning of their journey, and they were ready for whatever came next. As Ayana and Maya's journey continued in the Kung Fu class, they found themselves growing stronger and more confident. The early days of being new students with little experience felt like they belonged to another time. Now, they were becoming familiar with the techniques, and more importantly, they were starting to see the results of their hard work. Each class was another step forward in their training, and every challenge, whether it came from the instructor or their fellow students, was met with determination. The class had become a place where Yana and Maya could escape from the outside world and focus on their growth. They were no longer intimidated by the sounds of punching bags or the taunts of Josh and his friends. The room was filled with the rhythmic slap of gloves against pads, the sound of feet shuffling on the mats, and the steady breath of their fellow students. It had become a familiar, comforting space, one where they could challenge themselves and learn. Every week, the instructor taught them something new. There were new techniques to master, new drills to complete, and new sparring sessions to participate in. Yana and Maya took it all in, working tirelessly to refine their movements. They knew they had only scratched the surface, but with each class, they felt like they were getting closer to something big. One evening, after a particularly exhausting class, The twins were sitting on the edge of the mat, drinking water and talking about their progress. They had just finished a long session of practicing their footwork and blocking techniques. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, but they were proud of their efforts. They had been training for several weeks now, and it was starting to show in their performance. "I think we're finally starting to get the hang of this," Maya said, wiping her face with a towel. Yana nodded, her eyes focused on the instructor who was demonstrating a new move to the class. "I agree. It feels different now. We're moving faster and we can hold our own in sparring." Maya smiled. "It's nice to see that we're actually improving. I mean, at first I was sure I'd be the one to quit, but now I'm excited to come back every time." Yana looked at her sister and grinned. "We're a team. We can do this." As the instructor called for the students to gather around, Yana and Maya stood up and joined the group. The instructor had something important to share, a new set of drills that would test their endurance and precision. They were going to learn how to defend against multiple attackers, a challenge that required not just skill, but also incredible mental focus. Yana and Maya listened closely as the instructor explained the drill. The idea was simple, yet difficult. One student would stand in the center of the mat, while the others would take turns attacking from different angles. The student in the center had to block each attack and respond with the appropriate counters, all while maintaining control over their movements. It was a test of their agility, timing, and ability to think quickly under pressure. The twins knew this would be a real challenge for them, but they were excited to push themselves. It was one of those moments where they felt like they were on the edge of something new, something that would take them to the next level. They weren't just learning techniques anymore, they were learning how to survive in a fight. This was real training, the kind that would prepare them for anything. As the drill began, Ayana volunteered to go first. The instructor gave her a nod of approval and she stepped into the center of the mat. Her heart raced, but she took a deep breath and focused. The first attacker came at her with a quick jab to the chest. Ayana was ready. She stepped back, blocking the punch with her forearms, then spun around to counter with a kick aimed at the attacker's side. She could feel the movement, the power, as her foot connected. It was a perfect strike. "Good," the instructor called out, and Ayana felt a sense of pride swell inside her. But there was no time to rest. Another attacker came at her from the left, this time with a sweeping low kick aimed at her legs. Yana reacted quickly, dodging to the side and blocking the kick with her leg. She retaliated with a punch to the attacker's stomach, and the blow landed with a satisfying thud. She was in the zone now. The adrenaline was pumping, and her body seemed to move without thinking. She blocked, dodged, and countered each attack with precision. The other students watched in awe as Ayana handled herself with such grace and strength. She was no longer the beginner who had stumbled through her first class. She was becoming a fighter, someone who knew what they were doing. When the drill was over, Ayana stood in the center of the mat, breathing heavily but with a wide grin on her face. She had done it. She had handled the multiple attackers, and more importantly, she had done it with confidence. Her improvement was undeniable. The instructor gave her an approving nod. "Well done, Ayana. That was impressive. You've come a long way since your first class." Yana smiled back, her chest swelling with pride. She glanced at Maya, who was standing off to the side, watching her. Maya's eyes were filled with admiration, and Ayana felt a rush of gratitude for having her sister by her side. Maya had always been there for her, through thick and thin, and it felt like they were both growing stronger together. They were a team, and nothing could break that bond. Next, it was Maya's turn. She stepped into the center of the mat, and Ayana watched closely, cheering her on. Maya was just as focused as Ayana had been, her movements sharp and deliberate. She blocked each attack with confidence, countering with strikes that were just as powerful as her sister's. There was no hesitation, no doubt in her movements. Maya had come a long way, too. As the drill continued, it became clear that Ayana and Maya were no longer the underdogs. They had earned their place in the class, not just as students, but as fighters. The respect they had gained from the other students was evident in the way they now approached their training. No one underestimated them anymore. They had proved themselves through hard work and dedication. After the class, as the students gathered their things and prepared to leave, Josh approached Ayana and Maya. He wasn't smirking this time. His tone was different, respectful almost. "You two, you're good," he said, his voice not quite as cocky as before. "I've seen a lot of people come and go, but you two are sticking with it. I guess you've earned my respect." Ayana and Maya exchanged a glance, but neither of them smiled or said anything. They didn't need to respond. They knew that respect was something that had to be earned, and they had earned it through their own hard work. They didn't need Josh's approval. They had come to this class to become the best version of themselves, and that was exactly what they were doing. As they left the school that evening, their bodies exhausted but their spirits high, Yana and Maya walked side by side, knowing that they were on the right path. They had pushed through the early doubts, the bullying, and the challenges. They had proved to themselves and to everyone else that they were more than just beginners. They were fighters, and this was just the beginning of their journey. The class was buzzing with energy as the twins, Ayana and Maya, entered the dojo for another lesson. They had grown accustomed to the routine by now, but each class still presented new challenges, pushing them further than the last. They were no longer the quiet, unsure newcomers who had stepped onto the mats months ago. They were now confident, focused fighters, and every time they stepped in front of their instructor, they were ready to prove just how far they had come. Today's class was going to be different. The instructor had announced that they would be sparring with each other, but this time, there was a twist. The students had been split into pairs, and they would compete in a friendly yet competitive sparring session. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to practice applying everything they had learned in a real fight scenario. The instructor explained that the challenge would involve both strategy and physical endurance. Each pair would go head-to-head, and they would be judged on their ability to defend, counterattack, and control the pace of the match. Yana and Maya stood together, their hearts racing with anticipation. They had sparred before, but now it was different. They weren't just sparring to learn the moves anymore, they were going up against each other to test their growth. They shared a quiet moment, both of them feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. "You ready?" Yana asked, glancing at her sister. Maya nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "Let's do this." The instructor called out the pairs, and when he reached their names, he announced, "Ayana and Maya, you're up next." The twins walked to the center of the mat, facing each other. The rest of the class gathered around, forming a circle, and Josh stood with his friends, watching intently. There was a certain excitement in the air, and the twins could feel it. Today wasn't just another practice. It was their chance to show everyone, especially Josh, how much they had improved. The instructor explained the rules one last time. "This will be a timed sparring match. You'll have 3 minutes to show what you can do. The objective is to control the center of the mat and score points through controlled attacks and solid defenses. Remember, this is about technique and discipline, not brute strength." Ayana and Maya nodded, ready for what was to come. They had trained for this moment, and now it was time to put everything they had learned to the test. The bell rang, signaling the start of the match. Immediately, Maya lunged forward with a series of fast punches, testing her sister's defenses. Yana was ready, moving to the side and blocking the attacks with ease. She then countered with a low kick, aimed at Maya's legs, but Maya anticipated the move and blocked it with a swift parry. The crowd was silent as the twins exchanged punches and kicks, each trying to land a clean strike while also focusing on their footwork and positioning. Ayana's movements were fluid and precise. She had always been the more aggressive of the two, but over the past few weeks, she had learned to control her speed and energy. She knew that this sparring session wasn't just about attacking, it was about reading her opponent and reacting quickly. Maya, on the other hand, had always been the more strategic twin. She preferred to study her opponent, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the sparring continued, it was clear that the two were perfectly matched. Josh, standing off to the side, watched the match closely. He had been a strong presence in the class since the beginning, and he couldn't deny that Yana and Maya had gotten better. He had tried to provoke them in the past, but now, watching them spar, he was forced to admit that they had earned their place here. Still, he wasn't about to show any respect. He was determined to prove that no one, not even the twins, could outdo him. Back on the mat, Ayana and Maya continued to spar, their movements becoming more intense with each passing second. Yana moved in for a quick jab, but Maya ducked and countered with an elbow strike aimed at Ayana's midsection. Ayana grunted in pain but quickly recovered, spinning to the side and landing a clean punch to Maya's shoulder. The impact sent a shockwave through Maya's body, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she used the momentum to perform a low sweep, knocking Ayana off balance and sending her to the mat. The audience gasped, but Ayana was already on her feet, ready to continue. She couldn't let this setback stop her. They had trained for moments like this. She took a deep breath, clearing her mind of the pain, and focused on her sister. Maya, too, was breathing heavily, her face flushed with effort. She wasn't going to let up, not when they had both come so far. As the match wore on, the twins' movements became more calculated. Every punch, every kick was carefully timed. They had learned to think beyond the physical aspect of the fight. Now, they were learning to read each other's intentions. Ayana's aggressive style was countered by Maya's patience and strategy, while Maya's quick thinking was met with Ayana's speed and power. It was a beautiful dance, two fighters moving in perfect harmony, each one testing the other's limits. Finally, the instructor called out, "Time!" The sparring session was over, and both twins stood in the center of the mat, breathing heavily but with smiles on their faces. They had pushed each other to the limit, and both of them had emerged stronger for it. The instructor stepped forward, nodding with approval. "Excellent work, both of you. You showed great technique and control. That was a very even match." Josh, watching from the sidelines, couldn't hide the mix of respect and disbelief on his face. He had expected the twins to falter, to make mistakes. But instead, they had held their ground, proving that they were not only capable fighters, but also masters of their own discipline. He couldn't deny that they had earned their place among the best in the class. Yana and Maya exchanged a proud look. It was moments like these that made all the hard work worth it. They had come so far, from the nervous new students to the fighters they were today. And the best part was, they had done it together. As the class ended and everyone started to gather their things, Josh approached them, this time with a different attitude. "You too. You're better than I thought," he said, his tone surprisingly respectful. "I'll admit it, you're not bad." Yana and Maya exchanged a quick glance, both of them smiling. There was no need for words. They had already proven everything they needed to prove. "Thanks, Josh," Yana said with a nod, her voice calm but confident. "But we're just getting started." Josh didn't have a comeback this time. He simply nodded and walked away. For the first time, the twins didn't feel the need to prove anything to him. They were no longer trying to earn his respect or anyone else's. They had earned their own respect. And that was all that mattered. As they walked out of the dojo that night, Yana and Maya couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished. They had faced challenges, pushed through their doubts, and come out stronger than ever. But deep down, they knew this was just the beginning. They still had so much to learn, so much to achieve. And as long as they were together, nothing could stop them from reaching their full potential. The days after the sparring session seemed to fly by for Yana and Maya. They had pushed their limits during their match, and now, everything felt different. They were no longer the quiet, uncertain twins who had first walked into the dojo months ago. They had earned the respect of their classmates, and more importantly, they had earned respect from themselves. Their bond as twins, which had always been strong, was now even stronger, each of them recognizing just how much they could rely on the other. But even with their newfound confidence, they knew they still had so much to learn. The journey was far from over, and they were determined to keep improving. Each class was a new opportunity to refine their skills, and every moment on the mat was a chance to grow, both as fighters and as individuals. There were still techniques to master, strategies to perfect, and challenges to overcome. One evening, after another grueling session, Ayana and Maya sat together, stretching out their sore muscles. The class had focused on a combination of striking, blocking, and dodging, with a few rounds of free sparring in between. Ayana was exhausted but exhilarated. She had always loved the feeling of pushing her body to its limits. "How do you feel?" Maya asked, glancing over at her sister. Ayana grinned. "Tired but good. I think we're finally getting to a point where it feels like second nature." Maya smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "I know what you mean. I used to think I'd never get this far, but now it feels like we're really becoming part of this, like we actually belong here." Ayana nodded, her expression serious for a moment. "I think we've proven that. We've shown everyone that we're not just here to mess around, we're here to get better." Maya's eyes softened. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ayana gave her a look that was full of pride and warmth. "Yeah, we have, but we're not done yet, not by a long shot." The instructor approached them as they were talking, his usual calm expression giving way to a small, approving smile. "I'm impressed, both of you," he said. "Your progress has been remarkable. The way you've handled yourselves, your dedication, and your improvements, it's clear to me that you're committed to mastering this art." Ayana and Maya exchanged a glance. the pride in their eyes matching the instructor's praise. They had always known they were capable of more, but hearing their instructor acknowledge their hard work felt like the final confirmation. They weren't just beginners anymore. They were well on their way to becoming seasoned martial artists. "You've earned my respect," the instructor continued, "but now I want to see if you can take things to the next level." The twins straightened, their interest piqued. "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "I'm going to pair you up with some of the more experienced students for a special session," the instructor explained. "It will be a real test of your skills. You'll be up against some of the best in the class, and it will require everything you've learned so far. This isn't about winning, it's about pushing yourself, testing your limits." Ayana's heart raced at the thought of facing the top students. It was one thing to spar with each other or with less experienced fighters, but going up against someone with more skill and experience was a whole new challenge. Maya, however, was ready. She had always been more patient, more strategic in her approach. She had been waiting for an opportunity like this, one that would test not just her physical abilities but her mental toughness as well. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Let's do it." The instructor nodded and gave them a small smile. "Good. I'll pair you up with Josh for the first round." The twins exchanged a quick look. Josh, the same boy who had tried to intimidate them when they first started, the same one who had spent weeks making snide comments and testing their patience. Now they would have to face him, this time not as beginners but as fighters. "I'll make sure you're ready for him," the instructor added. "But remember, this isn't about fighting with anger. This is about proving that you've mastered your discipline. Focus on technique, not emotions." The twins took a deep breath. They had come a long way since their first encounter with Josh, and now it was time to show him how much they had grown. They weren't intimidated anymore. They had trained hard, and they knew they had the skills to take him on. When the time came, Josh walked onto the mat with a cocky grin plastered on his face. He had never taken the twins seriously, but now that they were about to spar, he had no idea what to expect. As the instructor called out the start of the session, Josh moved forward with his usual aggressive style, punching, kicking, and trying to overwhelm his opponent with power. He was faster than most, stronger than most, but he wasn't as quick as Ayana and Maya's movements. The twins didn't rush in. They had learned that patience and precision were far more important than speed and power. Ayana and Maya had spent weeks working on their reflexes, and it paid off. They dodged Josh's heavy punches and expertly blocked his kicks. He tried to throw them off balance, but Ayana countered with a quick jab to his side, while Maya executed a perfect spin kick that caught him off guard. Josh's confidence faltered for a brief moment. He had expected to overpower them easily, but now he was the one being forced on the defensive. Ayana and Maya moved in sync, their attacks like a well-choreographed dance, each one anticipating the other's moves, covering the gaps, supporting each other. They had trained for this moment, and now they were proving just how far they had come. The instructor watched carefully, his eyes sharp. "Good, keep it up," he called, encouraging them to continue. "Remember, control, not aggression." As the match went on, Josh began to tire. His attacks became slower, his movements less precise. Ayana and Maya, on the other hand, were just hitting their stride. With every move they made, they grew more confident, more in control. Josh tried to land a final punch, but Ayana blocked it effortlessly and followed up with a clean strike that sent him stumbling backward. The session ended with the instructor's whistle, signaling that it was time to stop. Josh was breathing heavily, his face red with frustration. The twins, on the other hand, were tired but composed, their posture straight and calm. The instructor stepped forward, his voice steady. "Well done, both of you. That was a perfect demonstration of technique and discipline. You didn't just fight back, you fought with control, with respect for the art. That's what sets you apart." Josh, still catching his breath, walked over to the twins, his pride clearly bruised. "All right, I'll admit it," he said, his tone begrudging. "You two are better than I thought." Ayana and Maya smiled, but there was no arrogance in their expressions. They had earned his respect, but they didn't need it. They had already proven to themselves what they were capable of. As they walked off the mat, the twins felt a wave of pride. They had faced Josh, the very person who had once looked down on them, and they had shown him, just as they had shown themselves, that they were fighters, strong and determined. And this was only the beginning. There was still so much more they could accomplish. The instructor smiled at them as they gathered their things. "You've taken a huge step forward today," he said. "I look forward to seeing how far you'll go." Yana and Maya exchanged a look, their faces shining with excitement. They knew that this was just one victory in a much larger journey. They were fighters now, and no one could take that away from them. Marcus and Malik continued their training, but things had changed. They were no longer just two quiet boys who came to class to learn martial arts. The other students looked at them differently now, with respect and a little awe. But the twins didn't let the attention get to their heads. They knew that true martial arts wasn't about showing off or fighting to prove you were strong. It was about discipline, patience, and understanding how to control your own strength. Every day they arrived at the dojo early. They practiced their forms slowly, focusing on every movement. They watched their breathing, their balance, and the way their bodies moved together. Sometimes they would help each other correct a stance, showing that even the smallest mistakes mattered. The other students noticed, and some started asking the twins for tips. Marcus and Malik didn't mind helping. They remembered what it felt like to be the new students, unsure and nervous. The twins also began noticing something else. The bullies who had threatened them were no longer mocking anyone. Instead, they seemed quieter, more careful with their actions. It was clear that their encounter with Marcus and Malik had left an impression. The twins didn't laugh at them or make them feel small. They treated them with respect, which made a bigger impact than any harsh words or actions could have. The dojo felt safer, calmer, and more focused than ever before. Marcus and Malik realized that strength wasn't only about physical ability, it was also about self-control. They saw students who were stronger than them in certain techniques but lacked focus, and those students often made mistakes or got hurt. The twins understood that a true fighter learned to control not just their body, but their mind. They started teaching this lesson to the younger students, explaining that being strong didn't mean being mean or aggressive. One day, a group of new students joined the dojo. They were shy and nervous, unsure if they could keep up with the older kids. Marcus and Malik remembered how it felt to be new, and they decided to help. They worked with the newcomers, showing them the basics and praising their progress. Slowly, the new students gained confidence. Watching them improve reminded the twins why they loved martial arts in the first place. It wasn't about winning or defeating others. It was about growing, learning, and helping each other become better. The twins also spent time reflecting on what had happened with the bullies. They realized that their skills were a gift, not something to show off for attention. They were proud of how they had defended themselves, but more proud of how they had handled the situation without letting anger take control. They understood that fighting without reason could hurt not just the other person but themselves as well. This understanding made them more careful, more thoughtful, and more disciplined. Their parents noticed the changes too. Marcus and Malik had always been polite, but now they seemed even calmer, more focused, and more responsible. They helped out at home more, worked harder at school, and showed respect to everyone they met. Their parents were proud, not because they could fight, but because they had learned something far more important: how to be strong without being mean. At the dojo, their teacher also recognized the twins' growth. He praised them for their skill, but also for their humility and willingness to teach others. He reminded all the students that martial arts was about respect, patience, and helping each other. Marcus and Malik took this lesson to heart. They began helping younger students with techniques, showing them how to stay calm during sparring and how to protect themselves without hurting anyone. Over time, the twins became role models. Other students looked up to them not just because they were good at martial arts, but because they were kind, disciplined, and fair. They learned that true respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned through actions, patience, and care. They also discovered that by helping others, they were growing stronger themselves, not only in skill but in character. Even the older students who had once been bullies started changing. They watched the twins and noticed how being kind and disciplined could gain respect more effectively than being mean or aggressive. Some of them even asked the twins for guidance. The dojo became a place where everyone felt safer and more confident, knowing that the twins would help anyone who needed support. Marcus and Malik also learned to face challenges without fear. They knew that life would sometimes throw difficult situations at them, just as the bullies had. But they realized that staying calm, thinking clearly, and using their skills wisely would always help them handle problems in the best way. This lesson gave them confidence, not just in martial arts but in school, at home, and in everyday life. One afternoon, the twins sat outside the dojo, watching the sunset after a long day of practice. Malik smiled and said, "You know, I think martial arts isn't just about fighting. It's about learning who you are and helping others." Marcus nodded. "Yeah. And we showed that even people who seem quiet or small can make a difference without hurting anyone." They both laughed softly, feeling proud but humble. The dojo continued to grow, with more students joining every month. Marcus and Malik's story became known among the new students, inspiring them to work hard and act with kindness. The twins understood that their journey was not just about learning kung fu. They were learning how to live with courage, patience, and respect for others. As the months passed, Marcus and Malik never sought attention or tried to prove themselves again. They continued practicing diligently, helping others, and applying the lessons they had learned in every part of their lives. They knew that strength was most valuable when used wisely, and that kindness and humility were as powerful as any martial arts move. By the end of the year, Marcus and Malik had grown in ways they never imagined. They were no longer just students. They were leaders, teachers, and examples of what true strength looked like. Their story reminded everyone at the dojo that courage could come quietly, that respect could be earned without anger, and that the most important battles were often the ones fought inside, not against others. Even years later, the twins would remember that time with the bullies not as a moment of fear, but as a turning point in their lives. It taught them that patience, skill, and respect were stronger than any threat. They carried this lesson into school, into friendships, and into their future, showing that true power comes from self-control, humility, and helping others grow alongside you. Marcus and Malik's journey was a story of courage, wisdom, and growth. It wasn't about defeating others. It was about becoming better themselves and inspiring others to do the same. Every time they practiced, every time they helped a new student, they remembered the lesson. Real strength is quiet, careful, and kind. And that strength stayed with them forever, shaping the people they would become.